Okay, so I think this is the most important budget we've ever had and the most important finance update I've ever given you. And that is because the Australian federal budget, May the 12th, brought out some massive changes which will affect probably all of you. Basically, the government is looking for ways to get more tax, and there's three big ways that Australians can minimise their tax. One is through the use of trusts, another is through negative gearing, and another is through the capital gains tax discount, all of which are in the firing line in the latest budget. So I want to focus on negative gearing because it's probably the most relevant to everyone, and just give you some strategies on how you can keep negative gearing for as long as possible, or even get negative gearing if you don't currently have it under the new rules. So we're going to basically use these new rules, we're going to adapt to them, and we're going to get you guys in the best position possible. So very important video. Okay, so what's negative gearing? Negative gearing is when you deduct the losses from an investment from your total income tax. So that includes your salary, your dividends, your rental income, the whole lot. It goes on your taxable income, and you can deduct the investment cost from there, which is a fantastic way to minimize your tax. It's absolutely incredible. What the government is proposing is that from May the 12th, if you buy an existing property, you can no longer, as an investment, you can no longer deduct that from your total taxable income. You can only deduct it from the rental income you receive if it's an investment property. So basically, if you got a loss, it just gets carried forward to future years on that rental property, but you don't get the great benefit, the real benefit of negative gearing, where you're writing off your income tax, which is why a lot of people do negative gearing. They do it because they pay way too much tax, they're on a high taxable income, and they want to deduct some things. So the government has also said, though, that you can still get negative gearing if you buy a new build as an investment after May the 12th. So that plays on. What the whole idea of it is that they want to encourage people to invest in new housing. They want to increase the housing supply. Everything they've tried so far isn't working that great when it comes to increasing houses. And now we've got the war on Iran, and the house price is just, the cost of building rather has just increased dramatically. They're trying to find novel ways basically to incentivize the building of new homes. So that's the state of play. So I'm going to run through three different scenarios which should cover the most of you, and what I would be thinking of if I were you going forward. So the first case is those who already have investment properties before budget night. That is play on as normal because you're actually grandfathered. All of your existing arrangements continues on into the future. So a couple of things you might be thinking of if you're in this scenario. The first one is, should I really be paying down my debt? Because this is negatively geared debt, if you are negatively geared, which you may never get again. So maintaining that negative gearing for as long as possible is going to be vitally important for you. So you might want to consider, if you're not interest only right now, you might consider, should I go on to interest only? And therefore I'm not paying down this debt, because you want to get the tax deduction. The other thing that you might think of is if you had any plans to sell this investment property, you might want to reconsider that too, because like I say, you may never get negative gearing again in investment property unless you buy a new build. You may never get it again. So you might want to hold on to that as long as possible. You might reconsider any plans to sell this investment property depending on your financial circumstances. So that's the first scenario. Second scenario is you have an owner-occupier house that you may consider turning into an investment property in the future. Now, just like the investment properties, if you have an owner-occupied property, it's grandfathered, right? Because you bought it before the budget night. So what that means is if you turn it into an investment property, you can still get negative gearing, potentially, depending on your situation. If the losses are more than the income, you can get negative gearing write it off your income tax. So again, you might consider, right, what's your strategy here? If your plan was just to buy another own-occupied property and sell this one, you might go, is it possible we can hold on to it as an investment? Because we can get negative gearing. Like I said, you may never be able to get it again on a property. So that might be one consideration. The other consideration might be, if we do have the plan to turn this into investment property, do we really want to be paying down this debt as well? Or do we want to be paying down as little as possible? There's two ways you can do this. The first one is that if you're putting money into redraw, like extra repayments, you might reconsider that. Because when you put in money into redraw, you're actually paying down the home loan. And even if you take that money out again, it's no longer tax deductible if this investment property turns into an investment, unless you draw it out for investment purposes. See, it's the purpose of the funds that makes things tax deductible, not where the loan is. You can't just have a loan on investment property to buy a car for personal uses and then deduct it as being tax deductible. So you might consider going, right, maybe we should use an offset account instead. Because when you use an offset account, it is purely a savings account. You're not technically paying down the home loan. You're just offsetting the interest in that offset account off your home loan. So instead of putting money in a redraw, you might go, right, we don't want to pay down this loan more than we have to. Maybe we should just put it in an offset account, and therefore, if we turn this an investment property in the future, we can take out this money in the offset account. We can buy another own occupier with that money as a deposit, and basically we have as much debt there as possible, which is tax deductible. Because remember, the game plan, when you have own occupier debt and you have investment debt, the plan is to always to reduce your own occupier debt as much as possible, but hold your investment debt while you have own occupied debt, because one's tax deductible and one isn't. So that's the strategy there. You might also go, should we even pay down the debt at all? Like if your plans are imminent that you're going to turn to an investment property, you might go, is there a way we can go interest only? Because we have this strategy. We're going to turn an investment property. We don't really want to pay it down. We need as much money as possible because we're going to buy another own occupier. Do we really want to be putting more money into this property? So that's what I'd be thinking if I was considering turning an investment property, an own occupier into an investment property in the future. Then there's the third scenario, which is you found your forever home, an own occupier, you don't want to buy another property, but you missed the boat because it's not negatively geared. It's an own occupied property. You can't write it off your tax. You're not going to turn an investment property. What do you do? And there's actually a way you can still get negative gearing. It's through a strategy called debt recycling. So debt recycling is a strategy where the idea is you pay down your own occupied debt, which is not tax deductible, and you replace that debt with investment debt, which is tax deductible. Now, I said before that the government is only letting you negatively gear for property when it comes to new builds in the future after the budget night. However, it still applies for shares. You can still get negative gearing for shares. If you pull out $20,000 out of your home to buy shares, that's tax deductible. You can write that off your income, the interest that is used to buy those shares. If you buy shares out of your own pocket, it's not tax deductible. There's no interest, right? So this is the strategy of debt recycling. The debt recycling strategy is you have your own occupied debt. You also have another split, which is for investment purposes. And the idea is that over time, you pay down this own occupied debt and you increase your investment debt. What the investment debt does is you're buying shares, index funds, things like that, and you get dividends, which come in, pay down your mortgage quicker. You get big tax refunds, depending on how much shares you buy, because you've got negative gearing, which come in again and pay down your own occupied property quicker. Under this strategy, a lot of people that would have taken 30 years to pay off their home loans actually can pay it off in about 8 years, just by paying down their mortgage quicker, right? Though they also want to keep this investment debt because it's tax deductible. So the idea is you might have, say, a master limit. It might be $500,000 on your property. and maybe at the moment 400,000 of it is owner-occupied debt, and 100,000 is to invest in shares. And the idea is that as this decreases, so you pay down the home loan, the owner-occupied debt goes down to 200,000. Well, all of a sudden you got 300,000 here, which you can put into shares if you want. You keep the debt, but it's turning from non-deductible debt to deductible debt. Now, debt recycling is a strategy that most financial planners do not understand. You have to really work in the field for a while. I used to be a financial planner, and I used to specialize in debt recycling for clients. I'm now a mortgage broker, so I know exactly how to structure the home loans for this type of stuff. And I know the financial planners that work in this field and specialize in this. And you really do need to have this specialization. And I could, if anyone's interested in that type of strategy, I can introduce you to financial planners that can help you out. And of course, I can structure your home loans to be able to make the best use of this. So they're the three ways that you can still take advantage of, negative gearing after these tax changes. The other couple of things where they made changes to the CGT discount, that was a great way to minimize tax, because especially for property flippers, because what they used to do is they'd buy a house, maybe they'd renovate it, or sometimes they just hold on to it. If you hold on to it for 12 months, you can get the CGT discount, which basically reduces your capital gain in half for tax purposes. So if you held on to it for 12 months, say you made $100,000 gain, all of a sudden you're only paying tax on $50,000 of the income of that gain, which was great, and obviously it's a better way to make money for some people than to work in a job where you're getting $100,000 in income and you're getting taxed on the whole lot. So basically, they're getting rid of that. Again, grandfathered up until 2027, July the 1st, which means that, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Some people are thinking, well, how would I sell my property before July the 1st, 2027, and then I can keep the old rules and I won't be affected? Well, the thing is, you're keeping the old rules anyway up to July the 27th. Going forward from there, all that's happening is that your each year, the capital gain for each year will be then under the new policy, which is actually an indexation method. So just a bit of background, the whole reason for the CGT discount is that there's inflation. And we need to find a way to account for the inflation, because that's not really an investment return. So originally the government had a thing where they had indexation. They just work out what the inflation was for each year, and they deduct it from the capital gain, and you do this calculation, which basically meant that this is the real capital gain, this is the inflation, we're only going to tax you on the real capital gain. Back when they used to do this, it was very complex to try and work out this formula. The Howard government came in and said, look, from now on, let's just divide it by 2 if you've held it on for longer than 12 months, and they'll last you for however long you hold on to it for inflation. Now they're going back to the indexation method. They are doing one thing which isn't quite as good as the original indexation method, which is there's no, there used to be a way that you could basically average your losses, average your capital gain. So over, say, a period of 5 years, it could be. And so it was so much better that way, because then if you had a capital gain, you could put a little bit on this year, a little bit on that tax year, a little bit on that tax year, and it's not as hard as taking a hit on one financial year. So right now, and going forward, you have to take the capital gain all in 1 year. So if you make a $500,000 profit, that's going on your taxable income. You're going to be paying the tax, the highest tax rate, which is, I think it's 45%. Which is obviously a big hit. So back before, they used to have that averaging thing, and over 5 years, and you could kind of put $100,000 in this year and $100,000 in this year, and it worked out so much better. So they're saying they're going back to the indexation model, but it's actually not as good as the original indexation model. But there you go. And the other thing is that trusts, which is another way of reducing your tax, because you can, basically split the income to all the different beneficiaries, and everyone pays less of a taxable rate than if it all goes to one person, if you say you're a family or something like that. So they're making it so the minimum tax payable on each beneficiary income split is going to be 30%. So that kind of gets away with all the, you might be splitting to someone that doesn't have any taxable income, and therefore that it might be less than the minimum amount for paying tax, so they may not pay any tax. So basically it gets rid of that. Anyway, the main thing is that is in your control is this negative gearing thing. And that's why I really wanted to do this video, because I think it's important for everyone. I can't reach everyone. Though if this does pique your interest and you want to chat more about it for your particular situation, then let's have a chat. Let's have a chat about your future goals. Let's have a chat about what the best way forward could be for you, and the best structure for you when it comes to your home loans. And like I said, if you need any professional help, whether it be an accountant or a financial planner, let me know as well, because there is still some great, ways here that you can take the most advantage. I've got so many clients that have huge incomes that are paying so much tax, and to me, it's something I want to help people with. I came from I'm from a family. My dad earned a lot of income, but he used to pay the top tax rate. No one ever, advised him properly on what he should, how he can minimize his tax. So I think everyone should get that advice. The government wants more and more tax. I think you should take advantage of it to, minimize it where possible, right? Unless you think they're doing a great job and you want to give them more money, you can do that. Anyway, that's basically a quick summary for you guys. Any questions, reach out to me.